There was the best use of
Or
AI I've seen recently with the adding stuff where it's from Star Wars, just Obi-Wan Kenobi, where they changed the dialogue, where he starts talking to Luke Skywalker about Jar Jar Binks. It's like, I kind of hated the guy, but I kind of loved him as well. But with Alec Guinness's voice, that's pretty cool.
yeah, I, I saw this on a movie recently that I think last year, the year before, I don't remember. It was this kind of disaster movie where on this huge tower, I think like a radio tower, like I don't know how high in the sky, there's a girl or two girls trapped there. And there was this thing with AI, and it was like almost a close up of the scene. And in AI, they changed it so that she said something else. And I think, could be wrong, it was something for like the Chinese market. She needed to say something else, or for another market. I don't remember. But you could not
Mm.
see that that was changed with AI and with special effects. It was impossible to see. I mean,
Yeah,
for me. Uh, so it's gone to the point where it's like really wow.
yeah.
But we'll get to
Yeah, we
that,
can talk
and
about
I'll.
AI as well, actually, if you want. In my industry, if that because that's an interesting topic.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go there later. So I first wanted to mention. So I'll try a compositor and 3D visual special effects generalist. So you work at Storm Studios, and they do a lot of really well known TV shows and movies. You and your studio worked on Shadow and Bone, Invasion, which is a series I first season I liked a lot. Wakanda Forever, The Old Man, The Last of Us, bunch of Star Trek series, and much more. I'll put a link in the show notes for people who want to see the full list. And obviously there's IMDb, but we'll get to that because there's some stuff that's not on there that you got to work on as well. Before we get to that, you have an interest in martial arts.
Yeah, I
Where did that came from?
uh
Because that's kind of like where people, I mean, you follow me on Facebook. And like I mentioned before we started recording, you commented every now and then, so I recognize the name. And I posted something about season 2 of The Old Man. And you're like, hey, I worked on that. I can say that
yeah,
now.
it was
I'm like,
finally
ooh.
on. You posted it like 1 week before I could say it, so when I could say it, was like, ah, finally. uh,
So obviously you don't follow me for, my special effects background, but mostly, martial arts self defense. So how did you get started training?
so that's a long story, sort of, because I think my first exposure to martial arts was when my brother started doing taekwondo when he was like 10 or I was like 5. So I started copying him. But then in my teens, I started doing judo for a while. I went to a club that was really serious about it for a while, where they ran out of business because it was only me and like six grown-up black belts. So I was getting my ass kicked for a year and a half until they had to close down. Where I went to karate and arnis and stuff like that. And then a guy came to my school and did these really cool moves, and I was young and impressionable. So I started doing capoeira, which completely ruined my body. I was training capoeira like 6 days a week, and then I couldn't use my arms for 10 years. Uh, don't stand more on your hands than your legs. Your legs are meant to stand up. So, but
Yeah.
after like a longer break from that, where he had gone to England to study philosophy, but he's one of my best friends. He'd been training a long time in a traditional Chinese system, or in an organization called Wutan, where they trained the very traditional Chinese stuff that ran away out of China during the Cultural Revolution. So it's like Ba Chi Chuan, Pigua, Northern Praying Mantis, Long Fist, and some very strange Chen Tai Chi that doesn't look like the mainland one, but kind of cool. And after that, I sort of drifted into Tai Chi more because I got older. And I'd spent like me and Magnus, my friend there, we'd been looking a lot into. He was very interested. He's the guy who introduced me to you and Mark McYoung and Rory Miller. He was very interested in like what's proper conduct. How do you actually avoid fighting? And they were very, very clear when I trained with Wutan, which I really loved. That like we're not training self-defense. We are not training
Yeah.
self-defense. We're training what was traditionally weapons arts before guns were invented that did have some open hand stuff, and now it's training predominantly the open hand stuff. And it's interesting and it's cool and it's got cool body mechanics. But he's sort of he was one of the, like, what do you call it, substitute trainers, or like the high up
Yeah.
disciples of the.
Assistant
Yeah,
maybe.
assistant trainer is a good word. Yeah, he was high up in that system, and he had a lot of experience from actual fights, having worked as a bouncer and as a security guard, and later on a policeman and stuff like that. And he was very good at taking what we were doing in forms and just showing us, no, what you're doing is this. This is something completely different, and that's why it's gonna work. And it's like, oh yeah. And then we started training with a lot of we did a lot of, like, Rory Miller's one step type of stuff, and that training. But then I found Tai Chi with Young Tai Chi in a system called Heaven Man Earth, and I've just, yeah, just been changing my body slowly, and my knees work again. Everything is just getting better in my body all the time. So I like that a lot. I think I've actually just from straightening up like this completely, but skeletally as well, I've actually gained like 2 centimeters in height. Uh,
Yeah, well, you mentioned it that doing capoeira maybe, may not have been the best thing to do it tremendously intensively for a long, long time because this is something we don't know when we're young because, and especially we don't feel it. So that makes it worse. But some of us don't have a body that is made for certain martial arts and self-defense systems. S- Sometimes, that's just not in the cards for you. You can do it for a while and then everything starts breaking down. And then you see other guys who can do it for like decades on end, and they're great even until old age, and that's fine. But that's them. That's not
yeah,
necessarily you. There's a lot of stuff that might be going on that you don't know. For instance, I had shoulder surgery a few years ago. Turns out that the tendon of one of the muscles in the rotator cuff, the hole that it goes through, there's different categories, and I had pretty much the worst category, which means that it's kind of like a saw. That tendon is kind of getting raffled, and eventually you cut it off simply because of the way that
mhm,
that's built. So they filed it really round so that it's a smooth hole now, but you don't know that when you
yeah,
start. And I did a tremendous amount of striking, so my shoulders got banged up as
yeah. No,
well.
I mean, I was very, like, back then. I was like, it was like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Tony Jaa hadn't even come out yet, really, and I was just the Matrix. And I was trying to do all
Yeah,
the fancy stuff, like jumping around, kicking 3 times in the air, and doing flips and stuff like that. And I mean, my body could handle a lot of the stuff as long as I didn't fuck up. It was when you fucked up, like when you fuck up a head spin. There's no
it's
body
pretty
in the
bad.
world that's built for that, where your head just goes like, and then you're on the floor. Uh, so I pretty much banged up this part, and just my arms were connected to it, and yeah, that was that for
Yeah,
a while. Took like 10 years to get
yeah,
back
that's
from
not
that,
good.
but
That's and did you have surgeries or
nah,
anything
it
like that?
was basically I just had like chronic tendonitis in both arms. It was
Mm.
like at the worst I could only lift like a teacup with 2 hands, and it was like there was some glowing guitar strings in my arms. But I mean, the curve of it was like, and then down and along, and then every time if
Yeah,
you're a
yeah,
bit of a workoutaholic, every time they feel better, you go like, oh, and you ruin yourself, and you ruin yourself, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah,
after a
yeah.
while, I just gave up everything on that. Just sat down, accepted that I was gonna be older and fatter, and then it sort of fixed itself when I didn't do myself over in a bad way.
Well, the healing capacity of the human body is quite impressive, and it's a matter of figuring out, okay, what am I doing that my body really doesn't like it? Okay, I'm in pain, clearly there's something there. But if you it might be that you're not doing enough of what you're doing, that you're just sore the whole time. It might be that you're not training correctly, like training six days a week for 2 to 3 weeks, and instead of taking a week off, then to recover, just keep going for a while, and then all of a sudden it breaks. Might be that your big movement muscles are getting way stronger than the stabilizer muscles, and that's messing it up. Could be a lot of things that if you figure out what the cause is, that you can then work on. For instance, if it's a stabilizers, which is a very common issue, is that okay? Train those, start training those, and then all of a sudden the problems might go away. Which is one of the things that I had to learn. Well, I knew it because people told me when I was young, and I was like, I don't need
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
My stabilizers are fine. I don't feel anything.
Yeah.
So wisdom apparently comes with age. I don't know if it's wisdom. It's just, but it is an experience with pain. That is an education in and of
That's one
itself.
of the things I think is most interesting with the system I'm training now is that it's all based on release. So suddenly, instead of like training the muscles around those areas that have been broken, I'm sort of like releasing everything down, and then blood starts flowing there again instead of just being jacked up around every injury. And suddenly, the injury comes back, but then it gets better
Yeah,
again, and then they're gone instead
yeah,
of like every other time they've come back. Every time I'm in a bit worse shape, and then you lift some stuff and they go away again. But now they're actually like it's like they're actually healing, which feels it feels better for me right now in my uh, what I'm doing in my life. So
yeah. And do you do, sort of self-defense applications of Tai Chi as well, or is it mostly forms, or what do you do?
this system is pretty traditional. So it's usually I get up like at 6 o'clock in the morning and I train for 1.5 hours, which is too short according to the system. But it's you do the Jiban Gong where you start by opening the body, then you do stance training where you're standing in the same 5 postures for 5 minutes each. But you get to rest your one of your legs on the last two because you're on one leg, then the other, which is nice. And while you're doing that, you are releasing, sinking. Everything is just dropping. Like so, you sort of get like this differential between your skeletal and your
Yep.
skeleton and your muscles, why everything is just hanging, becoming stretched, and opening the body. And then there's different opening exercises more, and then there's form, there's push hands, there's stuff like that. Applications, like you have to learn how to move based on release in this system for to do anything. So applications don't really matter until you actually become sort of like a Tai Chi creature that can actually move like that. But then suddenly everything you're doing
Yeah.
just works better than it used to, in a sense. So
Well, this is in many Chinese styles. They have this focus on Shenfa body
mm,
method is or body mechanics is what we would call it probably. In that you have to learn to move a specific
yeah,
way, and then all the stuff is added on top of that. Because the system that the Tai Chi that I do, we have our own Negong system, 24 exercises, and just at the basic level, it takes 1 hour to do 12 of
yeah,
the
exactly.
exercises. So, and it's quite, and that's just the basic level. And once you get to the higher levels, you can spend like many hours just only training that. You haven't done anything else. No self defense, no forms, no pushing hands. You haven't done
Yeah,
anything. Just basically conditioning your body to move and act a certain way, which is very esoteric to a lot of people who come from, for instance, combat sports. I've been doing combat sports for since I was, I don't know, like 15, 16. So I haven't stopped. But it's seeing these different approaches to combative arts, martial arts, self-defense, and so on. And that sometimes, what I've noticed, especially from the Chinese side, it is very difficult for people who come from, for instance, a Muay Thai or an MMA background to see any value in that,
absolutely. Yeah,
and
yeah.
vice versa. I've seen the opposite as well, where I see people coming from a Chinese system think like, well, we do real fighting and we do weapons and this and that, and then kind of think like, well, what those MMA guys are doing or the BJJ guys are doing, that's kind of just competition. I'm like, go roll with a BJJ black belt, see what happens, and you can try all the nasty stuff that you think that'll work.
Yeah.
See what happens. It's not
No,
that cut and
I
dry.
think
It's not.
if I ever was to, I'm gotten pretty good at avoiding fights over the years. But if I ever got in one, I think my default mode would be to drop back into Baji, where it's just drop stepping in with the elbow first, and wreaking hammock.
Well,
Uh,
Baji is
yeah,
pretty nasty. Again, it's such an underrated style.
oh,
We haven't seen it that much, for instance, in movies or so on either.
yeah.
There's a few, but
I
not
think
that
my
much.
favorite catchphrase for it is that it's the only thing that Chiang Kai-shek the last emperor of China and Mao Zedong agreed upon. They all had a Baji bodyguard.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a good friend here in Belgium who trains Baji with, I forget his teacher's name. Forget the province that he's from as well. But very traditional, very, very traditional. He went to China a number of times. He's invited his teacher here, trains really hard, and they just love to bang. It's elbows, headbutts, knee strikes to
Yeah,
the groin
we were
constantly.
every
And
time we were
they,
training applications, we were wearing like a full body suit so people could actually go
yeah,
do it full force on someone instead of pulling out or pulling back,
yeah.
holding back your punches. It was either like full body armor or going slow as like the safety floor when we were training applications. So,
Yeah, because some of that stuff is really nasty, and in that there's no way to do it slow and controlled. I mean, if you go fast, it's very difficult to control. It's just like you say with the drop stepping and then the fajin, the release of explosive power. It's very difficult to control in certain situations. You
yeah.
just can't.
I mean, if you do a proper Baji strike properly, you will be doing a drop step where you actually connect while the drop step hits, so that hits, but you also get this sort of thing where all your body mass drops in a wave through it as well. So you get like this ba zong thing where it just hits and then
Yeah.
penetrates. Which when you're hit by that, even if you're wearing a body armor, it's like, okay, that would be my rib cage if I wasn't wearing this like foam thing. So,
But that's what for me was always interesting when I was when I train with different people, different Chinese arts and so on, mostly, is that um the when you get to not commercial schools in the sense like the McDojos where they just try to have as many children as possible and just teach some martial arts, but it's mainly commercial and they don't really have no interest necessarily in developing deep skill. But when you get to a lot of these traditional guys, they can hit really freaking hard. And there's a lot of really interesting, concepts, techniques, principles, and so on, body mechanics that you can find much overlap with what you then see in combat sports, but just with totally different
yeah.
focus, totally different goal, different background, different structure in the system.
Like
So that,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, like and it depends on what problem they're trying to solve as well, right? For example, Baji does not look like anything you'll see in a ring because it's developed for people who are wearing armor. So they don't, twist their body to do an elbow. They have to turn the whole body because you're wearing an armor here. And once you see people doing training for systems where they're wearing like bulletproof vests and helmets, suddenly the movements start looking a lot more like that. No, those movements looks a lot more like Baji because Baji's it's built to circumvent the same problems that they have, like
Yep.
wearing a 40-kilo vest, right? So you would never be able to do Bagua in an armor. That
Oh,
would be
that would be
very weird.
different.
So yeah, and like in my Tai Chi system at least, I think any fighting or partner drill where there's resistance is more to just pressure test your ability to release. It's not really about fighting. It's just that if you're really, really calm and relaxed and unfazed by anything, you've reached a sort of level of equanimity where you don't react with fight or flight anymore. Then when somebody pushes or gives you pressure, you just, yeah, sure. You're just there. But you have to, like, yeah, if you can't do that when somebody's actually going trying to hurt you a bit, then yeah, everyone can relax in a hammock, right? Then you'd be better off
Exactly.
just taking a
Yeah.
Valium and lying on the beach. It's not the same.
Well, and I think the critical factor there is that, like you mentioned, you have to do a lot of work conditioning wise. Especially with conditioning, I don't mean lifting weights or running, running sprints. I mean a very specific type of training to get certain body mechanics right, to ingrain them to the point that you can't do it wrong
Yeah.
anymore, that it becomes instinctive to do it that specific way, which takes a tremendous amount of training. And then be able to do that under stress when somebody pulls a knife on you and tries to stab it and he's coming at you with
Yeah.
intent.
I
He
mean,
is
it
not
it has
posturing, is actually
you
going
have
to
to
try to kill
embody
you.
it. And like most of those
Yeah.
systems, at least in my experience, are built for you to, like my teacher calls it becoming the Tai Chi creature. Like you have to embody all of these changes until it's just the way you move. It's how you do things. You don't think about, like, if I was trying to think of all the internal mechanics I'm doing while doing the form, I would my head would explode, right? It has to just be the way you move. Then suddenly, I start throwing people around, and it looks almost magical at times, where it's like it doesn't look like you're doing much. But
Yeah.
but I don't
And
think
it's
I'm
not,
gonna become a great
it's
fighter
not
by
a,
doing it. But I do. What I
what,
do get is I'm hardly stressed anymore. That's
that's
worth
worth
more.
something.
Huh.
And what I wanted to say is that this is not unlike what you see in many other arts. Like, if you go watch a bunch of wrestlers, how they walk, it's going to be very recognizable the way
Mm.
they walk. If you go watch a few boxers, see how they walk and move around, you see a very different way of moving. And it's those body mechanics that they ingrain, years on end with extremely hard work, hours on end every day. Is that it? Like you say, you embody it. This becomes the default
Yeah.
setting for you. That's just how your body moves, and it's just that I found a lot of people kind of look down on Chinese martial arts because it's kind of flowery and it's difficult to explain. You've got a language barrier, a culture barrier, which
And
is very difficult to cross
they did have a
sometimes.
cultural revolution where they actually censored it and then tried to bring it back, which is gonna hurt you a lot. So,
Yeah.
either way you look at it. But
Yeah. I was in China in 91, and that was kind of when they were just starting to loosen up a little bit and basically try to kind of switch over to some sort of capitalist system. They didn't call it that, but you small enterprise and being a little bit more commercial minded was being not necessarily pushed, but kind of
mm,
slowly allowed. And they made a better decision than the Soviet Union, which kind of fell apart. And the Chinese saw it, and they're like, "We're not going to do that, so we're going to slowly transition." And I went to Shaolin. um, Shaolin then was not what Shaolin Temple was when my teacher went in the 80s, which was ruins. There's nothing there. There was no an old guy or so. There were no monks. There was nothing. When I went there, it was a bunch of wushu schools around, and didn't get to see a single monk. We could. Our guide told us, but we'd have to pay for it. I don't remember how much it was. It was quite expensive for like a 15-minute demo, and we're like, okay, no, we're not going to do that. We did have Shaolin beer, which was goat piss. It was horrible. Don't ever drink Shaolin beer.
that was my initial assumption when you said Shaolin here as well.
Now I am biased. I am Belgian, so we have plenty of great beer. So I was like, I'm in Shaolin Temple. They have beer. I'm Belgian. I have to drink it. I did. I regretted it. Never going back. What I meant to say is that at very different times, things changed a lot over the past 30 years and so on. As they always do, they will continue to
Yeah.
change. A lot less traditional martial arts in
Yeah,
China
yeah, yeah.
now. One of my students, he has to go regularly, and he said he trains Tai Chi with me, and so can't find a Tai Chi
Yeah.
school anywhere. I could find
I
MMA schools, stuff like
My
that,
my
but
impression from the
no
people
traditional
I've
martial
met that
arts.
are actually very good at Chinese martial arts as well is that most of the really good stuff is being taught by some weird dude in his garage rather than like a school. Everyone I know has gone to schools. I have some friends who've been to like Wudang or Shaolin for like a year and trained as monks and stuff like that. And they're like they get an impressive physique out of it and they get good willpower and there's benefit to this. But like the really good kung fu stuff I've seen has been always been from like some weird guy in the woods who didn't take many students.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've written about that on my blog, and I've talked about it before. And it's just that if you look at the timeline of Shaolin, what it is today and what it used to be, like I said, my teacher was there in the 80s. There was nothing. So, and I think it was in 80 or 81 that the movie Shaolin with Jet Li came out, and that was like a huge smash hit. And then the Chinese government figured out like, oh, okay, this is something we can work with, patriotism and so on. And what do you know? They found this old dude somewhere who used to be a Shaolin monk, and he knew all the forms, all the applications, everything. And he taught a new generation of Shaolin monks. And that's what we
hmm.
see now. I toured with them when they came to Belgium. because my teacher was one of the, big names in traditional martial art, Chinese arts here. And they were for sure athletes. I mean, very impressive. Didn't see them do a single
Yeah.
application.
Have you
They
seen
no
this?
idea.
Are you familiar with the guy Rokas who does this martial arts journey thing on YouTube?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Because in his latest, like, I actually really like the self-defense challenge thing he's been doing last year and this year, because they're actually contacted some people with where the self-defense situations aren't just, fighting some guy in a street fight. It's like, oh, you're being sexually harassed at your job interview. What are you gonna do? But
Uh,
they've got a Shaolin dude there this year, and he spent like 2 episodes getting over just hitting someone in the face. So
I've seen some people send that to me to
yeah.
annoy me. I've seen some of it. I have very strong
Oh yeah,
opinions on
I
what I
have some
see
as well.
there. Some of it
Mm,
is good. Some of it is like you have no idea what the
yeah,
fuck you're doing. You you're like, this is
yeah,
horrible. I don't like to criticize people publicly all that much because first of all, the name of my Facebook group is "You Are Not Ares, God of War," and that includes me. I don't know everything there is to know about violence and war and so on. So some humility is in order. That said, we're all entitled to our opinions. I have mine, and I disagree with a lot of stuff that I saw there, and some things that I'm like, okay, this is really good, and all the stuff is like, why would you even? I mean, you're if I show some of that stuff to friends of mine who actually are violence professionals in the military, outside of the military, private sector, some really bad dudes who did really bad things in their life from the wrong side of the tracks, um, they shake their
yeah.
head.
There's
And I get why. And I try to see the positive
yeah,
always. Because there's one thing, there's the old thing, the man in the arena. So the old poem, I think it was, the old text, where it's not the critic who counts, it's the man in the arena, the man who is pouring sweat and blood in the arena. He has a right to speak. And that is something that I will always respect. If you put yourself out there, because it's not easy, especially with a bunch of these guys, they've got really big YouTube
mm,
followings. And then when what they show there, if it's not good, a lot of people will either drop them or be very, very critical. So if you're putting yourself out there,
yeah.
respect, mad respect. We can agree to disagree about what you did, but like everybody who's sitting on his ass behind his keyboard typing up a storm, you're not doing that. Okay,
No,
go out and do it
my opinion
yourself.
on that was that it's way better than average of what you find on YouTube. I
Yeah.
was just like, oh, they're actually talking about some of the stuff that's important. That's good. That's a step up. So
Yep. Yep.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
certainly
I
not a
just don't like the
professional on this.
formats.
Like most of my self defense experience has been to not fight, to just go like, oh, I'm sorry. Do you want a beer? And that works 9 out of 10 times. Even if it's not my fault,
the,
offer them
the
a beer.
the issue that is mostly is about um I had to learn that the hard way because I would start training the system and I think, well, this is awesome, this is the best thing ever when I was young, and then I'd get beat up by a Muay Thai guy. It's like, oh crap, that you know I can't do anything. Okay, I have to study this and blah blah blah. And I think, oh, okay, now this is the best thing ever. And then somebody else would kick my ass, or they would show me stuff like, okay, yeah,
Mm,
that's really good. You didn't see the knife that I just pulled out of my pocket and planted in your
mm,
stomach because you were looking at my hands. You were doing this kind of stuff, and I could sneak up on you and kill you that way. That's a fair point. So, and off we go to study some more. So my perspective is often coming from multiple different systems and so on, and also looking at as much as possible. Okay, what is reality? Nobody can know it all, but there's a lot of overlap. And what I see is that the more you specialize in one direction, the more difficult it becomes to see it through a different lens. Like you've got a varied background as well, studying many different arts, so that gives you a really good perspective from just having experienced that. And even if you've only trained like a year or less or whatever, it's still more than somebody who never did that
Yeah.
at all. And especially if you only focus on styles in a specific format or a specific region, for instance. Yeah, you do karate and you do judo, but you never did pencak silat. Or you do Muay Thai and you do kickboxing and you do regular English boxing. Okay, but you never picked up a
And you've
knife.
never grappled. And like,
Yeah. So and it's all. I mean, there's a time and place for everything, and everything has value. Everything can work. The question is, are you willing to bet your life
yeah.
on it?
And,
And then that's all of a sudden when small things that seem stupid get to be very, very important. When it's just I call this existential fear, which is very hard to train for, which is what often the military is really good at to help you face that. And it's that for instance, a lot of the knife defense stuff that I see, I like. I don't like it. Why? Because people are too flippant about it. They're too
mm,
casual. They're playing. I'm like, it's okay if you want to do it that way. I see why you're doing it, and I don't necessarily disagree completely. But I prefer to approach it like, okay, this is lethal force. Somebody's trying to
mm,
end me. So I have to take this very, very seriously. In my class, where we practice with weapons, even if it's just, practice weapons, not sharp wood or whatever, I'm like, you treat this like a
mm,
firearm. It's always loaded. You don't play with it. You don't point it at people. You don't poke people with it. You imagine that this is
yeah.
a gun. So it can go off if you don't treat it with respect. Just one of my students, my own business student, just today let me know that he injured himself cleaning his sword. And he says, I'm always careful. I always do this and that, yada, yada, yada. And just 1/2 second of inattention and he had to go get stitches. But yep, that's real
I
life.
used to do blacksmithing a bit back in school because I went to a weird school where we had a blacksmith. And of course, being a nerd, me and my friend went to make some swords. And there was a sword that was just sticking out of one of those, what do you call it? A vice, right? Where it's like, it's,
I think
yeah,
I think I know what you mean. I
you
know what
sort
the
of
term is,
strap
but
it in and it stands out to sharpen it.
yeah,
And I was
yeah,
just a bit inattentive and I just turned around and turned back and just threaded it
yeah,
inside here and just had to like pull my arm up because there was like this
yeah.
far in was just sword. I was like, oh and that was like half a second of inattention near something dangerous. Um,
Yeah, you can find a lot of these videos online now of people who get into accidents in factories and stuff like that, where a machine grabs you and there's like the machine has no feelings. It is not angry at you. It doesn't care about you. It's just a machine. It will wreck your body in a second if you don't respect that, if you don't pay attention. And it's the same with weapons. And I find that it needs to be an
mm,
attitude. Is like, okay, you train with a practice knife, don't care. You treat it as if it's a real one. You don't become complacent because that's what you're
yeah.
ingraining. Like they say, you fight the way you train. It's not 100% that, but you don't want to ingrain certain habits.
I mean, you have the classical
That I mean,
examples of people disarming someone from a knife and then giving it back, which I'm not sure
yep.
if any of them are real, but the point
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
real.
Lauren Christensen
So
told me that. So Lauren Christensen told me that one of the police officer actually did that in real life because he was always disarmed, gives the knife back to his training partner,
yeah,
and then he disarmed a guy in the
yeah,
street and he gave the knife
yeah.
back. And fortunately, he survived. But it's yeah, it's real. All right, we gotta get to the special effects part
Yeah, we have to do that.
because
Or I'm going to correct you immediately with that and just say visual
go ahead.
effects, because there's
Visual
a
effects.
clear
Sorry about that.
distinction there, which is great that we get this mistake now, so we can correct it for everyone who's listening. Because special effects is anything that's in camera. So anything from
Right.
special effects makeup to some guy shaking a box with styrofoam to make it snow, or what, like on set water, anything like that, that's special effects. And visual effects is distinct as the stuff that's happening after anything's been shot, where you are working on film negatives or digital media where you're changing it afterwards. Yeah,
Cool. Excellent. Okay. So now everybody
no,
knows. Um, So you're a compositor and a 3D visual effects generalist. What's a
So
compositor?
I used to do 3D before. I guess I'm not really a 3D generalist anymore because I work full time as a compositor at Storm. And a compositor is basically like Photoshop, but with 24 images per second. It's when most of the stuff we do is taking out stuff that's not supposed to be there and putting stuff in that's supposed to be there. That's the simplest explanation.
Okay.
But it's like, anytime there's a blue screen, for example, that's there because it's a one single color, so a computer can isolate that color and make it transparent. Then you can put stuff behind it.
Yeah.
But then suddenly you have all the issues that comes with that, with like blue light reflecting from the screen on the actor. Their edges have a bit of blue in them. The lighting doesn't match, and then you do a lot of color correction and integration, basically, and then making it look like it's been shot with the lens that the camera was using. Like different lenses have different artifacts. They have different amounts of chromatic aberration in the edges or distortions and softness in the lens and stuff like that. So trying to just blend everything in so it looks like it's, if you're putting something into film, like a 3D object that's been rendered into film, to try and make it seamlessly integrate into that scene. But it's a wide field, but you can sort of, like, After Effects is probably most people's entry
Yeah.
into what I do. It's sort of like that, but on steroids.
All right. What's the difference between a blue screen and a green
So,
screen?
not much, technically. There's two things about it that there's a simple explanation and a little bit more difficult one. One of them is that sometimes you want to shoot people wearing green clothes, and if they're in front of a green screen, it's harder. Like I did a movie where it's a stop motion movie. It's in a forest, and there's a lot of blue screen because it's stop motion. And then you have all these green trees. So obviously you're going to choose blue screens because then the
Okay.
green separates from the blue, right? It's quite simple. The other part is green is more luminant than red and
Okay.
blue. So basically, with your eyes, when you see something, the part of the visual spectrum that contributes to lighting or to the luminance you perceive, about 70% of that is from the green channel, and about 20% is from the red channel, and only like 7% is from the blue channel. So if it's a daylight shot, it is probably going to behave better. You'll have to do less work afterwards to integrate it if it's a green screen shot. And if it's a night shot, it might be simpler if it's blue because it doesn't, reflect as much light into the scene and stuff like that. But most of the time, my experience is that both work, and the people on set will just use whatever they had on hand. Sometimes people will actually like think about it, but sometimes you go to Prague to shoot Shadow and Bone, and you just rent whatever they have that's being able to be lifted behind something, and then they had blue screens, right?
Yeah. I know several people who, worked in Hollywood or actually work with Hollywood or work, have contacts there. And it's like, I think most of the audience has no clue as to just how chaotic and complex TV shows and movies are to make. It's just the hundreds and hundreds of people that are often involved, if not thousands sometimes, and how incredibly difficult it is and expensive also. But that when you have this wonderful idea and you write the scripts and everything is being prepared and da 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 da, and then you come to the location, and then there might be one thing that makes it impossible to
Yeah.
do it that way. Like, oh, nope, that's never going to work. That is going to cast a shadow,
Or you
for
just don't
instance.
have time.
Like, yeah,
Like you were gonna
yeah,
set up a blue screen, but you didn't have time, so you just shot it without it and said to
that's-
someone, "Do you know? Have you ever heard the word rotoscoping before?"
yeah,
Where you essentially cut out an object frame by frame for the entirety of the clip, which is, that happens a lot. We do a lot of that. Sometimes it's outsourced if it's a big job, because there are studios in the world that specialize on just taking those things and just churning them out. And it's fine up
yeah.
until the point where you have a actor with like long blonde hair, but then suddenly everything becomes like, okay, I have to cut out this hair
Yeah.
and this hair and this hair. So
there was a lot of internet talk about Henry Cavill's mustache in what is it, Justice League, because he was doing the Mission
Yeah.
Impossible movie and he couldn't
They,
shave his
they actually,
mustache when they
this
shot
is,
that.
I guess I'm not 100% sure about this, which goes for most things I say. But from what I understood, he had a contract where he was not allowed to shave the mustache, and then the studio uh, that was doing the Superman thing, they offered to add the mustache back on every shot in the other film instead of removing it in those few shots. And that gives you an idea of one very important thing that shows up a lot in my business, which is it's a lot easier to add something than to take something away. Because like once he
Yeah.
has a mustache, then suddenly his facial expressions change based on that mustache, and then you remove it, and he just looks like a dork. Right? But if you just add the mustache on top of his face while he's talking, it doesn't look that bad. Uh,
Yeah, there were some parts of the scene where he's kind of resurrected, where you can like, that
yeah,
looks really bizarre. And I can imagine. I mean, there's as much as visual effects have basically been going through this revolution and getting better year by year. It's still there. There are still limitations, obviously, and even on such huge budget productions, you can't make magic. I mean, you can do a lot of really cool stuff, but
yeah.
there's only so
And
many
it
things you
depends
can
on
do.
the approach as well. And I mean, it and the artists, what team is working on this? Because like, I mean, we're getting cooler fighter jets every year, but it still has to do like who's the pilot, who's actually flying this plane. Because there are some exceptional artists out there. There's some people that can just do stuff that I thought was impossible to do from an artistic perspective. They just hand draw some stuff in a frame that you would never be able to do that, and then just looks awesome, and you have no clue how they did it. So I mean, a good artist can save a shot, but if you want to do something that's not very practical and all the artists don't really want to do it, and it gets sent to the team just to get rid of it, then it's gonna look bad.
So,
So,
and how do you? I mean, do you have to do certain studies to do your job? How do you break into the
so
industry?
now or back then? Because
Let's say
now
now.
you can just go and study. Like I'm
Okay.
heavily involved with working with what's it called? A university in Oslo called Høgskolen Kristiania, where they have a visual effects course, a bachelor's degree in visual effects,
Right.
and what we teach there is to actually make you become. It's more like becoming a carpenter than becoming an academic in that sense. You just we try to make everything feel like they're working in the studio already. Um, and
Yeah.
there's lots of schools, good and bad, around the world. Our school was rated number 13 in the world out of like 400, so that was pretty good. We were like, yeah, 12 to go. Uh, but yeah, there's like depends on where you are as well. Uh,
Yeah. And how did you get started?
so I was first of all, I was a huge nerd. So I saw the old Star Wars films, the originals, and then the special editions came out when I was like 14 to 16. And The Matrix came out, and then The Lord of the Rings came out, and I was like, why wouldn't I be doing this? This looks awesome. I want to make all these cool things. So I started studying and looking into that. And I was back in the day, I was working in a video store and doing 3D animation. And some guy who was a customer was like, "What are you doing over there?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a 3D animation." And he was like, "Oh, I'm a film producer. Are you going to study that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to a school for 3D now for a couple of years." And he was like, "Okay, cool. If you're good when you're done, contact me. I'll get you a job." Which was like, "Okay, thank you, Magnus." Another Magnus than the one we mentioned before. I'm not sure that's on the recording. Um, but after I worked there, I actually started working a bit for him, and then I got into films and doing some 3D and stuff for films with him. And then I went for 5 years into ArcVis, which is doing architectural visualization, just to make more money. And after 5 years of it, I realized I don't care about architecture at all. I'm just making boxes look good. This sucks. And I've always been interested in making stuff look real, like making stuff look as realistic as possible. And when you work with architecture, they don't even want there to be a light switch on the wall. Everything has to be clean. There's no fingerprints on the window. There's no wear and tear anywhere. And I was like, I need to get out
Yeah.
of this. But I'd also sort of fallen in love a
Yeah.
bit with compositing during that, and then slowly shifted back into film to work with that.
Okay. I get that. My girlfriend, she does interior decorating in as a side hustle, and she works with some of the software. And it's true. It needs to look clean. It needs to be clear to the client. Like, okay, this is what that carpet looked like, and that kind of furniture, and yada yada yada. And yet they don't want fingerprints on the
No,
window.
and
They don't
but
want any of that.
there's other things as well. It's like, to me, also the stories that's being told. Like I said, I'm a huge nerd. I've been playing role playing games for since I was 5, technically. But I mean, I've been playing role playing games my entire life, and stories are important to me. And every story in an architectural visualization film is, here. Look at this location. Look how good it's going to look with our building. Buy it. And you get tired of that story after a while, but I wanted to,
Yeah.
like, I don't like working on commercials either, because I find the storytelling in commercials are rarely good. I just want to work on films and series and tell hopefully good stories. You never really know when you're working on them and if they're going to be good or not.
So how does that go? So I mean, so you work at Storm Studios. Does like a production company contacts you guys with a script, or what's the process until you get to
So
go
that
to
that
work?
depends a bit. There are some times when there are people who contact us with a script, and if they've worked with us before and they're like, we know you guys are going to be great for this. We want you in. But then after perhaps a while with that, I'm not doing the bidding part. So I'm speaking a little bit out of my ass here, but uh, roughly the process is that there are sort of these secret underground railroads for filmmakers where they contact different studios where you can bid on. You can
Okay.
ask to get sequences sent to bid on them, and then you bid on different shots for them. And if your bid is accepted, that's you get a price that they want, and you have a quality that they're willing to pay that price for. Then you are awarded the shots, and they're sent over. And then there's like these huge download ingest things where we would download huge packages of terabytes of data to work on that project, depending on the project.
And is it then that so you get the raw footage, or is it like finished footage, edited footage already,
Usually
or
we get like
at
just
what
the raw
stage do you
footage.
guys
There are
get them?
some times where we're working with other vendors as well, where there's some sort of collaboration. Let's say some companies doing the cleanup, and then we get the plates they've done cleanup on, and then we continue working on them. And
Yeah.
even in some cases, we'll like somebody does the cleanup, we do the whole environment, and then some other company like Industrial Light and Magic or one of the big boys do the super fancy robot alien creature or whatever is in front. Depending on like the production, but sometimes we're just doing all the shots ourselves. Other times we're working with. Most of the time, we're one of several vendors working on the show. But since we're a small studio, we get to take some shots that other studios might not be interested in, which is
Mm.
kind of cool. Because like if you are one of the big studios like Weta Digital in New Zealand or Framestore in London or MPC or Industrial Light and Magic, you kind of want to do, you get Thanos. You work on all the Thanos things in that film. You do that thing, or you do half of those scenes with that, because he was actually so difficult. I think 3 studios were working on him, sharing their assets with that.
Wow.
But like you want to get big stuff that you don't have to do a lot of things. But we're smaller. We're like 70 people, so we can take some sequences where there's like, yeah, we want 100 different things here that are never going to be used again, and we can go like, yeah, that sounds perfect for us, and we'll take it. And we can
Yeah.
give, since we're smaller, we have fewer steps to go through in communication. It's like they contact our visual effects supervisor, he talks to the artists and back, instead of going through like a chain of command to the bottom, and then so
Yeah.
our turnarounds can be a lot quicker on stuff like that.
Mm. And do you so once you get started on a project, do they then, like you mentioned, explain you the stories and what you is there feedback from the director, or or is it like, okay, here's like an outline that we write down and deal with it? How is the collaboration actually
Depends.
going on there?
It really depends from project to project. Usually, what we're working with is if it's a series or a film, we're working with the head visual effects supervisor for that project, who's managing all the different studios doing different things. And then we get a brief for
Okay.
all the shots that we've been awarded. We want this to happen here. We want this to happen here. Then we'll probably have a call with the VFX supervisor on their end, and he'll explain what they want roughly, just drawing some stuff on the screen, and we get these annotations to work with, and then we start designing stuff. And then we start sending over things to them and get approval on different aspects, to get creative approval on the layout or the assets that are going to be in there, if there's 3D animation or 3D models inside. And then there's like a step-by-step process where we work up from, like work in progress to like temp comps, where it's just like, this is roughly what the shot is going to look like. Okay, it's heading in the right direction, or, oh, can we change this? So we usually have like a weekly send off to every client on every project and
Yeah.
get feedback on the shots that we've delivered. And then you try to make all of those be approved before the deadline, pretty much. And then once you have final approval as well, there's a step called tech check, where you actually go through and look at every frame and make sure that you haven't missed anything obvious. So we have a lot of things or tools that we've made to make it easier to find errors in our own scripts, like, oh, suddenly there's a black pixel line on top, which can
Mm.
damage you if you're watching series. Like, I was watching Breaking Bad with my
Yeah.
girlfriend, and there's a scene in like season 6 or something. Now, how many seasons are there? I don't know. In one of the later seasons, there's just
Forget.
he's walking around the car. There's a black box that just goes into the corner and goes out again. And I was like, did you not see that? It's like completely 100% black, like a digital box going in. I'm like, what happened here? It's good because you spent hours of your life looking for mistakes on your own work and other people's work. So
But I was just going to ask you that. I mean, with the work you do you, can you switch that part off when you're watching a movie or
if the
TV
story is
show?
good, if the story is, unless it's really obvious like that, if it's such a glaring mistake, I can't. Like, then if I'm
Okay.
watching something where I'm immersed in the story, I can just not do that. I couldn't before. I think a
Mm.
part of it actually, the Tai Chi thing as well, just calming the mind, was like, yeah, I can accept. I have equanimity to a higher degree now. I can accept other people's mistakes without being angry. Um,
I want to talk about a few
sure.
shows, and first we have to mention that you have non-disclosure agreements. So for the folks who are, who don't know what that is, that means that you can't talk about everything. You're not necessarily free to talk about everything. You sign a binding contract that would be very expensive to break if you talk too much about things that are not out yet or that are in production and so
Yeah.
on. So whenever I ask something that is would go against the NDA, then you'll just have to say like, I can't really
Yeah.
talk about that. It's not a huge secret. It's just that this is how it works.
Uh,
Um, I wanted to talk about the old man because that's what where you mentioned on my Facebook page. I loved the first season. Uh, is that I really liked it a lot. It was a fun show. I liked the premise. I mean, uh, the acting is great, and you've got good actors, and yes, he's an ex CIA guy. Yes, he's old, but he still fights. But then you see that he's like, this sucks. He's all banged up. He's trying to recover and so on. Really like that. Now, my thought then didn't go like, oh, there's a bunch of visual effects here. That's not something that I then immediately associate with that show. But you mentioned like, but I actually worked on that. And you mentioned something that I think was very interesting, is that like that we could talk about some of the invisible stuff. For instance, John Lithgow's beard.
yeah.
Could you talk a
I
little bit
can
about
talk
that?
about that. It's this is a typical situation that can show up where they, like, when you're editing stuff, you have a storyline. I'm assuming this is what has happened, where they're editing stuff and they have a storyline, and then they realized we're missing bit of information. Maybe that could happen in this part of the story, so you shoot some pickup shots to put into the dialogue in a scene to add to some storyline that was suddenly became more important, or you needed to introduce a concept at some earlier stage or something.
Can you explain pickup shots for
So
the people
so
who don't know? Because I
yeah,
know
so
what it
pickup
is,
shots
but
is basically if you're done shooting and then 9 months later you have to go shoot some more scenes of dialogue or something with the actors to add to the scenes to make something in the story
yeah,
make sense, pretty much.
and the actor stopped working out. He doesn't look
For
the
example,
same.
like that's one thing that can happen. But in this case, like John Lithgow has a very specific length on his beard in that scene, and he shaved to something that was roughly similar, but it wasn't the same. And then every time they're basically sitting. It's in episode 1, so I can talk about it. They're sitting in a car driving somewhere. I'm not sure where it is, but I think it's in Afghanistan. I'm not sure. And it cuts back and forth between them, and then his beard sort of changes a bit, goes back, changes a bit, and goes back, and then can take you out of the film if something like that happens. So we had to basically transplant some extra beard onto his face, and it's one of those shots where even if I showed it to another visual effects artist, if you show two people in a car that are talking and you say, I've done visual effects on this, what do you think I've done? They're always going to say the outside of the car because it's probably a blue screen. But
Yeah,
they actually shot this in one of those new volume stages where they project like images on the screens around them, so you get nice reflections and the lighting really works and stuff like that.
yeah.
But no, we changed his beard. He's got like twice as much beard in our shots than in the original plate.
How how do you get started on that? I mean, so you see two different shots, like is the beard here is like this, and the next part, the next few frames, you see a different beard. Do you make a full model of what his beard should be, or how do you get
So
started on that?
we tried out something new here. With it's a tool that's an add-on to the software I use. I work in a program which is called Nuke. It has like a radioactive sign and stuff like that. It was originally it stood for New Compositor, but
Okay.
there's a tool for that called Keen Tools, which has a face tracker where you can, if you get some
Mm.
images of a face from different angles, you can sort of pull their face into that and sort of make a rough model of a face that will pretty pretty good match of what you're sort of, as long as it's a face, you're gonna get it pretty nice. As long as they're not like a zombie with half their face fallen off or something. And we sort of matched John Lithgow's face for that, and then we did basically something where we project his texture onto that and wrap it out in something called a UV space, where you just see a 2D representation of all the small quadrants on his face wrapped out on a 2D plane. So it's because this really weird image where it's like the mouth in the middle and the nose and the ears are here, and like it looks
Yeah,
totally alien.
yeah.
But then you can sort of see where his beard is there, and then we did some frame by frame comparisons with similar angles of his face in shots where his beard was correct, and we started like trying out different things to just add beard. It was a pretty cool and challenging thing, especially because they shot it with the LED screen. There was some weird lines going through the window, which was reflections of the small gaps between the lights and the LED screen, which was going straight through his beard.
Jeez.
So we had to do some math magic there to sort of do a frequency separation to get it that away and then multiply it back on top afterwards, which made everything look really good in the end. I'm talking a bit nerd here, but essentially what at least worked for half of them was just going in and just painting beard strokes with different colors that we just picked from his beard and just trying to layer like darker, middle gray, bright beard and then color matching everything. And a part of it was just trying to get the track to stick so he doesn't have actually
Yeah.
stuff floating. But once we started looking at the
It's
plates, like beard, when you're doing this with your beard and you have beard here, it actually there's a lot of overlap and floating. It looks really messy anyway. So we got away with a lot
yeah.
in those shots as well, I think. Um, but that was a cool and weird one. But like on the project, we did a lot of the stuff we do is just enhancing scenes with oh, my brain just stopped there for a second. Basically, where you do set extensions. You're just doing add-ons to whatever's behind them to make it look better. So there's a
Okay.
lot of shots that they've shot where it didn't look quite like Afghanistan, right? So you put more rocks in there to make it look more like the place that they were going to be or the place that they're going afterwards. So
Yeah.
a lot of our stuff is stuff like that.
I mean, you mentioned that you kind of make this 2D image of a face, and then you can paint stuff on and change it and this and that. And I asked one of my clients. He's a really big Star Trek fan, and your studio has worked on several of the Star Trek shows. So and I said, if you like, I can ask him some questions about Star Trek and so on. And he kind of jokingly said that, can you make the actresses be prettier? And so how far can you push that? Can you change the face of the actor that way into something different? And the corollary is that, let's say that, for instance, some more nerd talk. So when I was told this by somebody in TV, and he said that when TV went to HD, they had to change all the lighting because you could see the wrinkles of all the presenters, the women who were anchors on news shows and so on, and it didn't look good. So they had to do very much stronger lighting so that it kind of um, gums away all the wrinkles that we have. You can see that my lighting is good because you can see my wrinkles
Yeah,
really
we've
well.
got some bad
Um,
shine going on here as well myself.
yeah. So do you guys do that as well? Like, do you get asked, like, okay, can you make it look better, or can you make the actor look better,
The
or
only time
whatever?
I worked on anything like that was for a commercial for some, I think it was AccuView, some lenses in going to China. It was made in Dubai and sold in China, which if you take all the negativity towards women you can muster and put it into one production, sort of like every like I was talking about the stories, every story in those lens commercials were, hey, why are you so bad looking? Uh, why do you have such low social status? Oh, you're wearing glasses. Put on these, and then your skin is perfect, and everyone likes you. It's just like to me insane. But that's the only time I've had to do like some skin cleanup like that. But sometimes we'll do like continuity stuff where there's just someone doesn't it doesn't look like the same person as in the last shot, even though it is, and we have to just make him look more similar. Or one shot is where they have like a pimple, and then you take that out more for continuity than for anything else. I've heard of people who've had to do that, but we've never worked on stuff like that in my.
Okay.
And when it comes to the question for Star Trek, like, can you make someone prettier? Oh, how much time and money are you willing to spend on it, right? That's and then again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? So, like, there's a lot of people who
I
get
mean, he
plastic
was he,
surgery that look
yeah,
ridiculous, according to
that
me,
is
and
true.
then there are some people who
That-
think they look beautiful. So,
he
yeah,
was joking
obviously.
actually, but I said, look,
Yeah.
I'll ask him. I'll ask you. You want me to
There
ask it?
was
I'll ask it.
a good video I saw the other day where somebody had used AI to make everyone in an 80s disco into Lionel Messi. His face works perfect for every 80s hairdo. It's brilliant. They were so worried about them using
Uh,
this technology to fake political messages, and everyone's just making fun memes.
yeah, and I want to touch upon the AI as well, but yeah, this is going to go. I mean, it's going all over the place. I had some fun with AI ever since the first, um, kind of the first public versions were there to generate uh, images. I wouldn't call it art, but just generate images. That's a few years. I think maybe a little bit over
Yeah,
two
like
years ago when it
Journey
started
and
getting
Dolly
public.
2 and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I was like, wow, okay, this is impressive, and this is crap compared to what's coming down the pipeline. I remember like a few months later, you saw the first videos actually happening in AI, and it was like I can't even say how low the pixel count was. It was a really, really low resolution video, but you saw the guy typing in a giraffe, and there's a giraffe
There's
that
something
happens
giraffe-like going
on
on
the
there. Yeah.
screen. Yeah, and then okay, add a red balloon. There's a red balloon that comes flowing in, and I did my 2024 bingo earlier this year, where I'll do make some predictions for this year, and one of mine is that we're going to see an AI generated movie, by the end of the year. So there's a few months left, so maybe I'm wrong. And one that actually is good
Yeah.
quality.
I think the
That
biggest
is
problem with that
right.
is like we looked a lot into AI and technology there, and it's sort of weird because it's behaving exactly opposite as everything else is in our field. Because usually, like when there's a breakthrough in our field, like Veta Digital makes Avatar, and they revolutionize how to do like water simulation. They have developed some new stuff, and they publish research papers. And then these research papers are read by other people who start implementing them in other softwares. And over the years, it seeps into the industry, and the industry it becomes the standard for how the VFX industry uses it. And then it seeps down even further until like more like amateur people can use it as well. And then it seeps down even more, it just trickles down to people over like 10 years where suddenly you can have some cool fluid sim stuff doing live stuff on your Snapchat, right? While AI is like the complete opposite because we've trained this model to do something that looks pretty okay if you push a button, but if you try to push a button again, you get something completely different that also looks okay. So for every person with the average Snapchat user, they can now suddenly make images really quickly, and they all look kind of good. But as soon as somebody wants to change something very specific about them, it's like, no, I can recreate it. I hope you're happy with the new result. If you don't like it, I can recreate it 100 times, but I'm never going to do exactly what you want. And like everything in my business is about precision. So it feels like our
Yeah.
business is like usually very top down, and this is coming very like ground up instead. So I think it's going to be a while until like amateur filmmakers start using it. I think you can see amateur films by the end of the year where people have done that, like short films where it's only AI. But before it becomes
Yeah.
like an actual film, I think that's actually years away. Because you want so specific things to happen for your
Yep.
direction. So
I've seen some of
luckily for me,
the
because if not, I would be out of a job like soon.
I've seen some of the image generators where they actually started working on that, where you can basically try to consistently get the same image results, or for things like
Mm.
cartoons, it seems to be working for actually human like live cinematography. I think it's not there yet, but I have to admit I haven't followed it that closely anymore since I first saw that. But
Like an interesting experiment with this, like I mentioned, I play role playing games. So sometimes my players will try to make a character, a portrait of their character using like some Mid Journey or something, and try to make someone ugly. One of the guys wanted to play a druid who was he was supposed to be like old and wrinkly and really not look good, like this sort of rugged old, not old, but like veiny, thin guy with a scar on his face. I'm just gonna try and see if I can pull it up here. Uh, this is what he got.
oh, okay,
It's like Fabio, you know. So until it can actually manage like exactly what people want, and
yeah.
then when you get it, you can say, "Can you make it more like this?" and it'll change. Yeah, at that point, it's going to be amazing. But at that point, you're gonna go home and you're gonna say, like, "Can you show me something Scorsese like with a hint of Kubrick?" And it'll just generate a film for you, right? At some point.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Well, we'll see. We'll
then
see.
I'll be a Tai Chi
For
instructor
for me,
instead.
I've always been a nerd. My dad bought us a computer. Um, I think I was like 10, maybe a little bit younger, and it was like a Lemon 2E, if I'm not mistaken, which was an Apple 2E clone. So for folks who are old like me, Apple 2E, look it up. That's a long time ago. And my dad was an electrician, and he said like computers are the future. You should do something in computers. I never did, but I chose a different path. But I always kept the interest. And you can see how AI, robotics, and so on are basically getting now to the stage of exponential growth and acceleration in technology and application. And we'll see where it
Yeah.
all lands. Nobody
The only thing
knows.
I'm 100% sure about, it's not going to go the way anyone thinks.
Sure.
Something weird is
Yeah.
going to happen in a way that nobody thought about.
Yeah. It's always been like that. Technology it has a life of its own. And I mean, I remember when the internet started and then people were like, yeah, there's no use for it. This is only people putting stupid GIF files and flash animations on websites. That it's a bunch
Yeah,
of
it's
bullshit.
just
It's a bunch
TV
of
but
bullshit.
better was what people thought it was going to be, right? But it's the same
Yeah.
thing like now with ChatGPT, for example.
Yeah.
Like for now, people are trying to use it as Google. It's not Google, but like when you start using it for the stuff that you can use, like my brother has used it in education, where they'll talk about Hume or Immanuel Kant, and then he'll make Immanuel Kant with ChatGPT, and then they can ask Immanuel Kant questions, and it'll answer based
Yeah.
on how he would reply, as well as it can, and then suddenly it's like something else. Or like I tried using it for role playing games to get ideas, and I've figured out that very early on it's just going good. It's the highest values are the biggest cliches every time. But what I've
Yeah.
done now is I've made one, because you can make your own GPTs now. I make one that asks me critical questions, where it's just asking me. I'm going like, "This is what I'm planning." It's like, "Oh, have you thought of this?" And it's like, "Oh, shoot, yeah, no, maybe." And then suddenly, what ends up on the other side is all my ideas. Just I have a critic being very, very constructively critical about everything I'm doing. Then suddenly, it's a much
Yeah.
better tool. So
Yeah. It's crazy how, I mean, how people have this idea, like you said at first, it's like, oh, use it. It's like a search engine. It's absolutely not a search engine.
it'll
Um,
lie.
but if you use it, yeah, it just hallucinates
And it'll know
and
something
comes
one
up with,
direction but not the other. If you ask it like what Brad
yeah,
Pitt's who is Brad Pitt's mother, and then it'll tell you who Brad Pitt's mother is. If you ask it another one, who is this person, they'll go like, I have no clue.
yeah. One of the things I do when there's a new AI that you can use, and I often try them out and ask them questions, like a bunch of them, and um, one of the basic tests is that tell me a joke about Donald Trump, and tell me a joke about Joe Biden. And sometimes they'll say like, you know, I can't tell you the joke about one or
Mm,
the other. It's like only I can't do politics. You just told me a joke
yeah.
about Joe Biden or Trump or whatever. But like, no. So, and that's one. And then I ask him like, okay, ask him like my name. Okay, just put type in, what do you know about this guy? I've seen some of the wildest stuff come up. It's like, I
Yeah,
never did that. I
my
was
mom
never
did
there.
that, and she was at some point the secretary for the prime minister. Apparently, what what are you going on about? Because it's heavily rewarded for giving you stuff that sounds useful. But it's
Yeah.
definitely not a
Yeah.
fact machine. But it's a good creativity engine. Or like I've used it for some really like one of back to violence again. I was watching a TV show with my girlfriend called The Rookie, which
Yeah.
is kind of fun. But I started like it's
It's
fun.
fun.
It gets to a point where it gets a bit extreme and weird after a while into the seasons. I was like, how
Yeah.
often do actually the police in LA shoot at people? Do you know the numbers for this? I was like,
No.
how many people were shot by the LAPD in 2022? And it turned, oh,
It's not
it's
gonna
like
be much.
36 shooting episodes, not
Yeah.
people shot, but just incidents where they shot. And I checked the numbers afterwards. But then it's gotten good enough to do math now. So I said, if we assume that one season is half a year and it's 22 episodes, and every cadet is like in a shooting episode, basically everyone, and then it's like how big of an error is this? And then it took like how many cops are there in LA? How often do they have shooting episodes? How and did the math on it? It's off by 6,000 to one. So I was like, oh, that's fun.
Yeah. And this is something that comes up often when I talk about violence in society as well, is that it's TV shows and movies that kind of, you know, that for a lot of people, that is where they get their information about
Mm,
violence. And they think that that's true, but it's not. And I forget, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I forget when Black Lives Matter became a really big thing, and it was like, you know, unarmed black men are being shot and this and that, and some TV show or YouTube channel, I forget, they were asking people in the street, like, how many unarmed black men do you think the police shot last year? Thousands, hundreds, this and that. The answer was like 25
Yeah,
or something.
and it's
And people was like, I can't believe that.
yeah.
It's true, actually. If you look at the
I mean,
data,
there's a
um,
lot to be said for like the, the the racism and police stuff in the U.S. That there's a huge discussion you can have there, where there's been ties to KKK, and there are
sure,
obviously more people being stopped for no reason based on color and stuff like that. But like when it comes to actual shootings, I've looked up those numbers as well, and it's yeah, but it's, I mean, you can always say like, yeah, but one is one too many. But then life
of
happens,
course,
and
but
it's really
yeah,
difficult. We had a debate in Norway actually
yeah,
about this when the police were armed for a while, because we don't actually have armed police most of the time. They have access to guns, but they have to ask if they should bring them when they're going somewhere. But then there was some terror threats or something like, so everyone was always wearing it. And there was a lot of talk about these. What do you call it in English when you unintentionally discharge your weapon? Is it just
negligent
unintentionally
discharge.
discharged? Yeah, and there was a lot of like media coverage about that, because there was a couple in a row, which is basically like yoo-hoo if you're in the media, right? And some of these people. Then the debate started. So should the police have guns? It's like, if most, there were 17 of them, and I looked it up, and like I think 13 of them was in like a bucket of sand while they were checking their weapon afterwards. It was
Yeah,
literally the security measure working.
that's what it's
Yeah.
for.
And then there was one guy who shot the mirror at work because he was practicing drawing. Like, he shouldn't have a gun. I totally agree. So I used to really told people like, well, how many car accidents do the police have every year? Should they not have cars? Like, there's a
Yeah,
difference between
I'm,
this
I'm
person
sure that
shouldn't drive a
doesn't.
car and they shouldn't drive a car. But it's that monolithic
Yeah,
thinking, I think, is a problem in the world today, is where people, they see small examples of an individual in a group, and then they paint the whole group with that. But I mean, that's basically racism and sexism, and everything is tied to that way of thinking. So
I've done two podcasts about that. One was last year about single variable
mm,
thinking. And it's when people think like, this is the issue, only this, nothing else. This is the most important thing, and this explains everything. And recently I did one about radicalization and de-radicalization, especially to yourself. It's we live in these very polarized times where just having a regular discussion is very, very difficult with people. I had one online recently where there's this guy, he has a PhD in history, and he was going on and on about, we have to do something about the Russian propaganda. And I'm like, yeah, because nobody else is doing propaganda. And then, people jumped on me and got upset and calling me names. I was like, dude, I mean, propaganda has been done for thousands of years by everybody. Every single side does it. It's called psychological warfare.
it's
It's
very
all within the
effective,
hearts
and
and
it really
minds.
works
Yeah.
surprisingly well.
And it's like, no, 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 no. This conflict, our side doesn't do propaganda. Only the other
It's part
side
of the
does that. I'm like,
propaganda.
yeah. It's like, have you noticed that you can't you can't see anything about RT Russia Today, so Russian news broadcasting? Can't see it. It's basically been censored. It's like, yeah, no, you don't have to believe anything that is on there, but you can tell me that that isn't propaganda. Propaganda is also what you are not allowed to say or not allowed to know. That's also a big part of it. And you see people have it. No, if it's not a Russian troll farm, if it's not the equivalent, then it doesn't matter. Then it's not propaganda. I'm like, you reduce it to this really narrow thing where the field of
And
propaganda is
then the problem
huge.
feels manageable,
And
right?
yeah,
So
it's this is, I mean,
they should all just
if you
read The Prince by Machiavelli.
it would help.
But then somebody
It
was
would
going to
help.
take it as an instructional manual, and then oh shit.
Well, they did that with 1984, so maybe don't give them
Yeah.
ideas. Is there anything else that you worked on in the Old Man that you can talk about?
Let's see. I mean, I've talked about we did some enhancement to make some stuff in California look more like Afghanistan, because that's where we had some. I'm trying to think of what's in the earlier episodes that I can't talk about. Yeah, I did one scene where there's that was actually pretty. It wasn't difficult, but it was artistically difficult shot to make everything look and feel good. Because there's a scene in. I'm gonna give you a spoiler now since you haven't seen it, but it's in episode 1 or 2, I think, where one person is stabbed in the shoulder with a knife, and it's not like it's like wrestling to the ground and then pushing the knife in. And there's this whole scene where he's lying dazed on the ground, and there's this guy walking around with a knife that goes in, and it's not really a knife; it's just a stick with a green dot
Yeah,
on top. Where we had to do like the knife blade the whole way through, going in and out
yeah,
of sunlight, shadows, and then going into his shoulder to make that look real. That was a cool challenge. And there were some shots in some caves uh, in those episodes as well, where they've built the cave as a set, but then the top needs to be used for lighting. So we've done like a full digital cave roof, stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, and there's more stuff coming. A lot of it, like for shows like that, for shows like The Old Man or Jack Ryan or something like that, it's mostly about making wherever they are believable. It's like the invisible stuff. Like there's some stuff where you've shot something in one location and then you need to make it look like there's no palm trees here, so remove the palm trees, right? Like Jack Ryan is actually they actually really go the extra mile to or did. I think the show is done, but
I
yeah,
haven't seen it. I
it's not
haven't
too
seen it.
bad. I mean, what I really like, it's got that James Bond feel where they actually go to every location they're at. So if they're in like Wukong, they're actually in Wukong. If they're in Bucharest, they're in Bucharest, and you can see them walking there. It's not like a set extension, because usually a lot of these shows are just shot in Vancouver or California or
Mm,
something, and then you put the Eiffel Tower in the background, and now it's Paris. Um, yeah, I mean, a lot of that. One of the things we also did is that was the reason we had 116 shots on this show and not just like 70. It was like we did 40 shots with just putting glass reflections into eyeglasses, because you've shot like something with
wow.
just a frame where the
Yeah,
character is moving around, and there's you know if you turn around and then you see the camera crew and the on set lighting, that doesn't work, so you take out those and then it looked bad. So we sort of recreated whatever was around them and made reflections in their eyeglasses, which was like a really quick job to do because it's so specific. Like
yeah,
the quickest thing to do in our business is every time somebody gives you something that's very concrete and specific, then you can do something really amazing really fast. And then when somebody wants
yeah.
something, we're not really sure what we want here. Can you design something that looks good? That's when you start getting the feedback with like, can you make it 10% more magical? Uh,
Uh, Skipping to something else, totally different. So your studio worked on
yep.
Wakanda Forever, which is like a huge, huge Hollywood Marvel movie production. Could you talk a little bit about the stuff that you guys did, but also how is that different from like a smaller production or a smaller movie or something like that?
So one of the things that's very different from series versus films is that when you're working on a series, every episode has its own deadline, which is staggered up to make it more manageable. So you're working on episode 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, then they all have their deadlines. But on a movie, it's like everything technically. Sometimes they will do the same thing with different deliveries for the film, where like this delivery has to be done by
Yeah,
then and then and then. But most of the time, it's like everything has to be done by this date. If you've pulled through or not, that's on your ass, basically. But when you're working with Marvel, they're actually pretty clear about it when they contact their vendors. Like, we expect a lot of changes. So
okay,
just calculate 10% more for each shot. Just don't take 10% less of the stuff we give you, so you're not cramped. And we listened to that. And we didn't have any overtime at all on basically on our show, except for some people that have to go into client calls in West Coast US time, which is like 9 o'clock in the morning is six
yeah.
o'clock in the evening here. So they have to work a couple of hours overtime just to be in those meetings. But apart from that, there's not hardly any artists working overtime on it. I don't remember how many shots we did, but I think it was upwards of 100, something like that. We did like one big action scene where somebody's raiding a lab in one of the opening scenes, where there's a lot of gunfire. And obviously, you want to add the muzzle flashes afterwards, because if you're shooting blanks in
Yeah.
close up, you can't use blanks when you're shooting close up fighting scenes. And then we have some daggers, for example, that are just not there. She's just holding handles so she can cut through people. And I think those had lights on them, so they lit up the scene because they were magical daggers. Basically, it's a superhero universe. But a lot of what was really nice about working with on a production that size is like we have these muzzle flashes going off, and they have these very specific lenses that they use. I don't remember what the cinematographer's name was, but she works a lot with Ryan Coogler, who did the film. And she's really good at choosing these really old-timey 70s lenses that really distorts the image and gets these beautiful flares. And like for a production that size, we got material where they'd shot reference flares with the flashlights for every lens, in every angle, on every part of the screen, like skipping through.
Wow,
So we had,
nice.
anytime there was a gun going off like this, we could just add the lens flare for that position, for that lens to get like and then we added lots of bells and whistles and extra detail on it, but it was always based on the reality of that lens to make it look good. We also did like a
Okay, yeah.
huge CG environment for that film. I remember because there's a part where there's a flood in the movie, and uh, we did one before the flood and one after the flood where there's been a lot of destruction. And this was this huge CG environment, and we made everything to match the location, and then tried to make sure that all the lens artifacts behaved exact, because it was a full CG scene, and we had to make it look like it was shot with the same cameras and lenses that they used in the production, which had these really like there's something called astigmatism, where the top and the bottom of it starts like stretching out towards the bottom, and everything becomes really weird.
Yeah, I have that in one of
Yeah,
my eyes.
it's cooler when it's on film. And we had lots and lots of work on this, and then for a while, that those two scenes were cut, but we were still doing some shots from the inside of the house that's in frame, where you just look out through the window, which is usually, if you were only doing those, you would just do a matte painting outside. You would just basically do a nice painting of what it looked like and then stay with that. But we were joking that our breakdown was going to be insane, because it was just going to be some dialogue scenes on the inside, and then we go outside and it's just huge CG environment with a simulated river and like bugs flying over the water and tiny little details everywhere, and then we'd just be inside again. But luckily they kept our shots in the final film. So
Nice. And you work, I think, one project you worked on the most was Shadow and Bone. I think the second
yes.
season. I I I haven't watched. I just watched like the first half hour, I think, of the first episode. You mentioned that you did a lot of work on the ship, for instance, and that kind of stuff. Um, I'm not quite sure what the genre would be. Would it like I don't know, steampunk? Would it be that?
It's a
It's
bit
kind of difficult to.
steampunky. It's a bit fantasy. It's also very like romantic teen genre.
Hmm.
It's like if Conan is like the male power fantasy, then this is to some extent. Like I don't mind at all. By the way, I think I actually like the show. I think they tried to do a little bit too much in season 2, where they were trying to cover too many storylines from the books. But that, like, no matter where this main character is going, there's always some handsome dude who's putting her in a jail cell, which is like a throne room, and then putting her in a nice dress and giving her jewelry and stuff like that. But it's a cool universe. They have this very specific magic system where everyone is you have, some people can control fire, some people can control air, some people can control blood and heart rates and stuff like that. Some people control magnetism, and they are, yeah, some nations are. I think the books seem to be quite good, actually, from what I've heard from people. But in a genre which is more like teen romance fantasy,
Yeah.
more than necessarily the Lord of the Rings.
And what kind of stuff have you done on that
So
show?
for that show, we did some pretty big scenes. Really, we did one entire city where we did every aerial shot of this fantasy city, where we did spent like a lot of time building the road layout and everything, and then it had to work with scenes that were shot on the ground, so it'd always be correct in the background, no matter where we cut. For those scenes as well. So there was a lot of close up where set extensions. So they have like shot stuff outside in some parking lot in Prague. And then there's blue screens in the back, and then we remove those and just build the whole city behind them. I think
Yeah.
a lot of this you can see in our breakdown shots on the breakdowns for Shadow and Bone 2 are out on YouTube. So if anyone wants to see them. Um,
Yeah, I'll put some
yeah.
links in the show notes because you sent me some YouTube links where what I really liked, where you can see like this is what you see in the end result, and you kind of remove the layers until you get this is what actually was
Yeah,
happening in
'cause
front of the camera,
like I
which
worked a
is
lot
really
on a
cool.
ship there that's called the Volkvolny, which they built the entire in like 2 sets of the deck just on a field outside Prague, and it's built completely to spec. And we had to get this whole design into 3D to make the exterior of the boat in every shot and the oceans around it. One of the weird things about that is since it's not on a rig that does this, I mean, it's technically it's not that unrealistic that a boat will go pretty straightforward in the water. It's not like in American movies where everyone's like standing like this.
Yeah.
But it's there was a lot of especially one shot I worked on for like 2-3 months where the ship
Wow.
is coming towards us like this, and then the camera just goes up and around it and around and around and up all the way into the clouds at the end. So it's like 46 seconds where you had to do like fluid sim for the water. You had to do the boat. You had to do all the ship and the sails. Like the hardest things about boats with ropes is that there's a lot of ropes. There's so many ropes, and they have to look like they're doing something intelligent. And then as the camera is going up, and you have to do the transition from all the digital stuff into the real set, and try and choose where did that boundary go. What we found out is you really want to stagger the border, so there's parts that's 3D and real and 3D and real in some areas. So it's not like
Yeah.
a hard
Yeah.
cut going through. But at some point in
Yeah.
that shot, the whole back portion of the boat just goes full CG. And when you come out, the people who were standing there are now digital characters instead. Because, for example, the guy who was turning the wheel on the boat, he was just doing this for 46 seconds. And the boat was going straight ahead, which looked really dumb. When once you noticed it, was like, oh shit, we have to fix this. Um,
Yeah, I can imagine that's hard because it reminds me of in Blade 2, which is a really fun movie where so Wesley Snipes' character, he's basically his secret lair is being broken into by two vampires, and there's a big fight scene. You can clearly see where the acting stops and the CGI takes over, and when it stops again. Which and it's not a bad scene per se, and it ends with this really cool close up with the sword and everything. So really, I liked it, but you couldn't miss that it was just a visual effects. Um, is that something that you think like such a blatant example? Is
I mean,
that
there are examples
with
of that
technology
today as well.
advancing?
Like
Okay,
Black
that was
Panther
my
1
question.
has a whole sequence. We were actually offered to work on that sequence, but I think we said no. Back in the day, back in Black Panther 1 day. We did the opening sequence for Black Panther 1. But
Okay,
there's this huge scene which is just sort of it was very ambitious and it didn't have that much time, and it looks a bit like PlayStation 5 suddenly.
the
The
fight
fight
scene
scene
at
at
the
the end,
end.
yeah, down in with the train and
Okay, I
everything.
thought it
Yeah, it
sucked.
looked it just like
Okay,
it's no secret to anyone that that just didn't work quite as well as anyone had hoped for. And it's the thing about doing visual effects with CG is that like if you do practical effects, makeup or something, if you do them badly, they still look real. It still
Hmm,
looks like a
yeah,
real but bad effect. But once you do
yeah,
something that doesn't look quite real digitally, it just doesn't look real. It looks like
yeah,
fake and bad CG immediately. So it's actually has a higher standard to actually reach. But then immediately, as soon as you make something that people can't tell is CG, nobody knows that it's there, right?
yeah.
There's a fantastic. I can pitch this, and I can send you the links if you want, because I would recommend everyone to watch this. It's a Swedish guy who made a series called what's it called again? Good visual effects is something invisible visual effects. Good visual effects is just invisible visual effects. Where he talks about all the talk now, because it's become sort of like a trope or like a theme in Hollywood that people will brag about how little they've used visual effects, and then you see the movie and there's been tons of people. Like Top Gun is a good example. Top Gun 2 is a very good example where Tom Cruise is standing there like, we shot everything practical, everything. There's no CGI, and there's like 2,600 CGI shots in it. It's like what? And
I just saw it again last week. It
it's
was on TV
amazing.
here. We watched it again. It's a
It's
fun
really
movie.
good. It's that movie is exactly what it should be. Exactly what you want when you want to go watch it. But like they did shoot planes in the sky practically, but it wasn't the correct planes. So those planes have been removed and then added the correct planes. But now they have perfect reference for how those planes should look. So that means it's going to look, and it's very, very concrete what you're making because it's just this fighter plane. It's not, some abstract
Yeah.
alien. So it's going to look better immediately just by that. But there's a lot of there's scenes where they've shot the person in the cockpit, so you get like the distortion in their face from the G stuff, and the whole cockpit around the CG. But it's matched to the original cockpit. Like we love when we get plates. Like the worst thing to get is something where it's just a blue screen and you have no reference. Then how do you make it look real? You don't know what real looks like in this shot. But as soon as you have like a scene where you just paint out whatever's there and then add something new, it's going to look better every time. But there's that's a really weird. Like it's gotten to a point where it's there and then add something new. It's going to look better every time. Barbie to not show the blue screens. And once you look at the background materials, like it's obviously really bad comp to remove this blue screen. That's obviously there, but then they say there was no visual effects in this. It's lots and lots and lots of it. There was even a scene where she's going down, flying from the roof, where her whole dress is CG. Like, yeah, nobody knows that it is when you lie to them about it. But they've been doing this like since the beginning of time. There's a film that won best cinematography where almost all of it is just fantastic matte paintings. It should be the best matte painting ever, but it's like from the 60s somewhere. The
Yeah, it's really really bizarre. I mean, my first recollection, I think, of just visual effects was Jason and the Argonauts, the famous scene with the
Ray
skeletons.
Harryhausen is amazing.
Because that was like, wow, okay, this is impressive. I mean, I was a kid, and then the movie was already old, and that was my first real exposure. Like, holy crap, they can do this. This looks so real. And I got into horror movies and bought all the magazines about the the makeup effects and all those kind of things. Really heavily into that when I was younger. So I was always had an interest. And when you can see like these jumps forward in what is possible, like Terminator 2, when that came out, just the liquid effect that you had with the T-1000 and so on, and then everybody did these morphing effects afterwards,
Yeah,
because you could
I
see it
think the
in
first
commercials
morphing
all over the
effect is in
place.
Willow, by if you've seen that film. It's like a fantasy
I haven't. I
film.
know it, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
That was one of the things that got me interested early on was Willow, and then The Abyss, and Terminator 2, and then Jurassic
Yeah,
Park,
yeah.
and The Fifth Element as well. It's just like,
Mm.
oh,
The Abyss is one of my favorite
yeah.
movies. It's so unappreciated. I don't know why people don't like it more.
Probably
I think it's
Cameron's
just a,
best in my opinion. Like in terms of storytelling.
apparently it was horrible to make. Apparently, like the actors refused to
Yeah,
talk about.
they were
Like,
literally living underwater for 2 months
yeah,
inside of an abandoned nuclear reactor with black ping pong balls
yeah,
on top, so there wasn't any light coming down. It was like this sounds like a nightmare. Yeah,
yeah. And Harris almost
yeah.
drowned. But it's a really good movie, and also special effects were quite good. And that was kind of my question, is like, when you see where you go all the way back to Jason and the Argonauts and that kind of stuff, and even before that to where we are now, where do you see the field evolving into?
That's a good. That's a tough question, actually. Like right now, we're in this sort of Renaissance type area of it, where because they're making so many series, make like you know Game of Thrones, but just all the series that are being made are heavily reliant on lots of visual effects, like all filmmaking always has been to some extent. So as long as that continues, I think the field is just going. Right now, it feels like everything is just exploding and growing. Apart from when there was a strike, that strike was worse for our business than COVID.
Yeah,
It
I can
was like
imagine.
really weird. We
Nothing's
were
going
so
on.
lucky to be working on some projects that I can't talk about right then, which were really long running projects that we didn't really lose anyone. We had to put some people on leave for some months, but when they got back, everything started rolling again. But there were like some companies that were just shut down or fired everyone and couldn't do anything. Really, really horrible. So, but I think the future of
Yeah,
it is it's going to. I think in 10 years' time, people are still going to complain about bad visual effects because it's still going to be hard to make something that looks really good, that looks real.
yeah,
Like, I think one of our proudest moments at Storm right now is for The Last of Us. There's some scenes
yeah.
with where they did some special effects makeup on a guy who was trapped under some rocks in a basement. But they have to go really up close and like cut in his forehead and stab a knife in him, and it's like really close up. And the special effects makeup just didn't hold up at that point. It looked amazing from afar. All of their stuff looked really good from afar, but as soon as you got too close, it starts to become obvious that okay, this is silicon or something, whatever they're using. And that was great because we had these really good references for what we were going to do, and we ended up changing the whole face to be completely digital with like mold growing on it and lots of details. There's actually even a 1 hour talk at Animex where one of our heads of FX is talking about how we made that head look so real. But it was one of our proudest moments was when somebody put our digital head close up and said, "This is how you do practical effects." I was like, "Yeah, now we've done it. We've fooled the people who love practical effects. Great."
But it's cool because I did see on the YouTube link that you sent me where you see again, the layers of what was filmed and then adding all of the visual effects on top of that. One of those zombies that is like trying to infect somebody, something coming out of his mouth, and you see the actor. There's nothing there. He just it's got its open mouth in front of the other actor, and you guys just added bit by bit, and it looks really
Yeah.
creepy.
Actually, that's our
The end
second
result.
proudest moment with The Last of Us was that kiss thing where he's like transferring the. It's actually it's a mushroom that's controlling them, so they're technically not
Yeah.
zombies. But he like these tendrils are going from his mouth to her, and it was nominated for Kiss of the Year at the MTV Movie Awards. Whereas we were like, okay, I can die now.
There's one more movie that I want to talk to you about. I mentioned it before. Um, when I looked at your IMDb and what you sent me from your company, I was like, okay, there's a movie called Viking Wolf. I was like, I need to see this movie. It's just the title, Viking Wolf, and I did. I actually quite liked it. Um, you mentioned that you came kind of late in the process on doing that. With the wolf biting people and so on, and redoing the moons because the director didn't like the one you guys had. So you mentioned there's a
Yeah,
story there.
that's one of the things that these are the things that you never think about, but once you think about them, they're so obvious. Because they've been doing the moon, and basically what they did was they grabbed the texture of the moon. Everyone knows what the moon looks like, right? And they took a ball and they put a camera that they used to project the texture of the moon on that, and then they filmed it sort of inside 3D with that camera.
Yeah,
And it just didn't look like the moon. And it's like, but it's the moon. Why doesn't it look like the moon? And then I came in. I was sort of working there a bit as a fire extinguisher during this period, so I was jumping from project to project, just fixing things. And I got there, and they were like, "They don't like the moon." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, okay." So I looked at it, and the first thing I did was obviously the camera was too close, so I pulled the camera like really, really far back and narrowed the field of view, so it become, instead of being this sphere like this, it looks more like flat, like you're used to seeing it because it's so
yeah,
far away. That was step one,
yeah.
to just take that sort of perspective thing out of it. But step 2 was more subtle, which is if this is the moon you're used to seeing, then usually the moon that they shoot the reference image from, that's shot not from where you are, but from somewhere in the United States. So it's tilted. So as soon as I
Yeah,
took the
yeah,
moon and
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
rotated it to a Norwegian moon, the Norwegian director went like, "Oh yeah, that's the moon," because all his life he's been looking at this moon, but everyone in the United States has been seeing this moon.
Yeah.
Everyone in South America has been seeing this moon, right? It's such an obvious thing that you can't. To you, that moon probably looked a little bit odd, but to everyone in Norway, it didn't.
It looked great.
That's the stuff that
Yeah,
I like when you start going into those details and you find the last 2% that make something look good.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it takes. I mean, it's like you said. You have to understand camera angles, and then you have to think outside the boxes. Of,
But
okay,
that
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Everybody sees the moon
Yeah.
difference, which is
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. And there's one shot in The Viking Wolf that I've never been so impressed with an actress doing a physical stunt in my life. Because there's a scene where it's a werewolf movie, and there's a big ass wolf that comes up to her and bites her, and she's got like a cask on her arm, which is why it doesn't
Yeah,
crush immediately. But it bites her, grabs her, and drags her up from the floor and starts fighting her. And when I got the plate where she's being dragged up before the wolf is there, I said like, "Oh, cool. Who's done the wire removal on this?" And they were like, "What? What are you talking about?" It's like, "Who's done the cleanup? Or who did the wire removal?" They were like, "There's no wire removal." And I was like, "You're telling me she did that? She just threw her arm out, then looked like she was being dragged by her arm up from the ground. Like her stomach muscles must have been working overtime for that shot. I have no idea how she did it. It looks so realistic.
nice.
I would never think anyone could do that without the wire here.
It's a fun movie. I mean, it's a little bit of a different take on the werewolf genre, while still conforming to the tropes a little bit.
I like that it's not.
And mostly,
It doesn't aim for a happy ending.
no, exactly. That I actually wrote a few short stories called "Horrible Endings," because I don't like happy endings as much. I really like movies where it just goes
Yeah,
straight
my
to hell.
favorite Star Wars movie is Episode 5.
Oh, okay.
Where
There's one
everyone's just being frozen or gets their hands cut off and everything sucks.
there's just one here, one of my a movie that I like a lot, Fallen with Denzel Washington, which again didn't get, I think, the respect that it deserves. Really good movie, excellent ending, and it's Brandon Sanderson once said that a good ending needs to be surprising yet inevitable. And the ending of Fallen is surprising yet inevitable. And when it ends, then you get it. Oh, okay, yeah, we knew this all along. Excellent movie. So when a movie doesn't get like the sunshine and butterflies ending, then I'm like, oh, okay, this is good.
Yeah.
And I like the effects because the wolf looks good. It doesn't look like a stereotypical werewolf that you often see. It doesn't look like, it's big, obviously, but it's not huge. It's
Yeah.
not like
And
3 people
that's one of
tall.
those situations where they use reference a lot. So they made like a wolf head uh, physical
Mm,
that they brought on set and just pushed around on a pole in the lighting as reference, but the whole wolf is just completely digital. It's not only CG on
nice.
that wolf in every shot. Uh,
Does it make a difference if like because a lot of the shots were at night? Does it make a difference day and night for you for the
it
work you do there?
depends. Like there's forgiving lightings during daylight as well. Like back in the day, that was a huge thing. Like the Tyrannosaurus in Jurassic Park looked a lot better because it was raining at night. So as long as you made it look a bit shiny and hard surface, it looked
Yeah,
good in the night scenes. But it doesn't look as good when there's light. But I mean, that's not such a big issue anymore, I would say. Although it is nice to be able to hide stuff sometimes if it's dark. But I don't know. I don't think it's harder anymore to do sunlight stuff. Only if you're working on something really difficult where you need to hide stuff. Then it's nice if there's some dark parts to hide it in.
okay.
But I mean, dramatic lighting is always if you want to describe the texture of a creature, you want dramatic lighting. Like
Yeah,
just to mention it, like just how differentiate. Like I'm just talking from a compositor's perspective here. Basically, you can subdivide every visual effects studio in the world into 3 sort of artistic parts. It's like the compositors that do the finishing product, where they sew everything together and integrate everything. And you got the 3D artists, who are the people who are doing all the 3D. Anything that's 3-dimensional being put in the film is made by them. And then you have the FX artists who do all like the simulations of smoke and flame, which are technically a part of the 3D artist team, but they're sort of their own. They use a different software called Houdini to sort of make all of the flames and like a landslide or lots and stuff like, or they can help with the modeling like they did on the infected in Last of Us, where they were like growing mold in different ways on the face and
Yeah.
stuff like. And then the CG department can be broken down into lots of different steps, because you got the people who are making the models, you got the people who are texturing the models, you've got the people who are lighting the models, you've got the people who are animating them, who are actually making them, move. And you got the riggers who actually put the bones inside of a character so it can actually move for the animator. And all of those are like very separate tasks. So it's a huge, much like when you're making film, like you have camera, lighting, sound, makeup, set dressing, all of these different roles.
And just changing
Sure.
directions a little bit. My son makes he's an amateur video game maker. He worked in Unity and in Blender, made his own 3D stuff and assets and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I looked into that a little bit when he started doing that. I mean, I had looked into it before, but when he started doing that, I looked a little bit closer. And I remember when Unreal Engine started. I have Unreal Tournament, whatever, 2003 or something, lying here somewhere.
Same.
And back in the day, I mean, that was like what pretty impressive. But Unreal Engine now is just insane by comparison. It can do a lot of stuff. It's really impressive. Do you see, how that is going to influence your industry? Where it's just the game engines getting to the point of realism and the possibilities that directors move towards that as opposed to what you
I
do?
think it has some strengths and some weaknesses. It's definitely being used now in the era of more like these, like The Mandalorian and some other series have used these LED walls where everything is live on screen while they're filming it. So that's why the Mandalorian can have a shiny armor that reflects his surroundings no matter where he is. That would be really hard to do with blue screens if it's just blue screens and green screens reflected in his like silver gray armor. Uh, but at the same time, once you start looking at it for a while, all of the locations are like the same type of rocky, the stuff that more
Mm,
like hard surface stuff. It's hard to do. Like as soon as you go into like water, to actually look like a
yeah.
water simulation and stuff like that. I think it's going to become a tool. It is being used as a tool. I think in the latest The Matrix movie, which was a really weird movie, but I liked it.
Mm.
It's basically about a movie about why it's a dumb idea to make this movie, which is fantastic in its own right.
Yeah.
I think basically the Wachowskis got told that if you don't make it, somebody else will, and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna make a movie about how stupid it is to make this movie." But they had an entire sequence there that was done in Unreal Engine, and I gotta be honest, maybe that's just me, but to me it looked. I knew exactly which one it was immediately when I saw the film. It was like,
Mm.
looks like a video game. But I mean, it's. I think it's just another tool in the toolbox. Like if you look into this business, there are so many different uh approaches to things, and visual effects artists tend to just, if they're smart, choose the best one. Sometimes you choose the wrong one and you're stuck with it. But for the most part, we're very, very eclectic, and we're not afraid to improvise and try something. And if there's a new tool, we'll try to use it. If it doesn't work, we'll stop using it. We'll test it again later. It's an ever
Yeah.
evolving and growing field. And I think stuff like AI and Unreal Engine and all these things are going to make their way into different things. But I think it's a little bit different. I think it'll be easier to make some specific shows. There's a show that I loved. Not necessarily everyone did, I think, but it's called 1899 on Netflix, where they've
I
used these
haven't
LED
seen it.
screens, and it's a fantastic way to use it because they're on a ship. and they're always standing, like, looking out over the waves and the sunrise, and it's just like...
Oh, wait, is that one of the Yellowstone
No, it's
spin-offs?
1899 is made by the same German directors that made Dark, and it's
Oh, right. Is it like in the Arctic, travel
it's almost, it's like a
something?
large steamship in 1899 going to the US, and it's this weird, almost horror-esque, strange
I saw the
story.
trailer.
I loved it. I thought it was fantastic, every bit of the way. I guess it just spoke to my soul or something. But
I'm gonna add it to my
yeah,
IMDb because I remember seeing the trailer and I was intrigued by it, but
it's
I
exactly what
didn't.
you don't think it is when you start seeing it.
Oh,
It's
nice.
very different. I love the fact that they're on a ship where there's people from every nationality, and a huge
Got it.
problem in the film is that nobody understands each other. Because it's like when you're on a ship and you start talking to the Norwegians, and it's 1899, they don't know how to speak anything but Norwegian. So now there's some people speaking Norwegian, some people speaking Spanish, some people speaking English, and there's a crisis and nobody knows what to do and they can't communicate, which is really cool. That would never happen in
Nice.
an American film, right? It's like, hello, I am from Russia. I
I don't
am
think
a
so.
Russian person speaking Russian English. Yes,
No, Mr.
to
Bond, I
die.
expect you to die. We gotta get to the Patreon
Sure
part
thing.
because otherwise, your girlfriend or your wife's gonna kill
Oh,
me. That
she's
I pick up
actually
here.
busy this evening, so this was a good evening. So I have all the
Okay,
time
that's
in the
good.
world.
Where can people reach you, or your website, or the studio? What do you prefer for where people can look at what you do?
I'm just gonna answer this. Are you still around? Yep, I'm still here. Um, so I don't have a website for my VFX. I have a Vimeo page for Torbjørn Nymark, which is hard enough to
Okay.
write without the. I love it when British
I'll
people say they can't say our o letters, and then they've got like asshole, butler, and awesome, which are all like o. You use the sounds all the time, man. Yeah, Torbjørn Nymark at
uh,
Vimeo can be looked at stormstudios.no, I think,
okay.
or com. I don't remember if it's
Yeah,
NO or
I
com.
have the link somewhere.
Um,
I'm just writing it down in my notes here that I add the links. All right, good. Folks, we are going to head on over to the Patreon bonus part of the episode where my questions, my patrons have a bunch of questions for Torbjørn, and we are going to answer these. You can watch these there. The link will be in the show notes, typically wimsblog.com/, and then the number of this episode.
yeah,
And then you'll find a link to the bonus
I'm gonna
episode.
need
You want to support the
sorry.
show? You will need more
Yeah.
whiskey. If you want to support the show, join me on Patreon. This is the 6th year of Patreon. Every month I add at least 4 videos and bonus episodes and so on. So there's a lot of stuff there. You will need a big bottle of whiskey to get through it all. It's and you can't find that stuff anywhere else. It's only on Patreon. So with that, thank you so much for your time. And appreciate this. This was a fun conversation for me. I learned a lot, and I hope the audience enjoyed this one
I
too.
hope so too. I'm honored to be here. To be honest, I was so happy that you asked me. I'm looking forward to the
Oh, my
weird
pleasure. My pleasure.
questions or cool questions. I'll do my best.
Excellent. Okay, folks, we're out of here. Talk to you next time. Bye bye.